Commandos were the brainchild of Churchill, who'd seen similar outfits operate successfully in both the Boer War and the First World War. A small number of highly trained soldiers would get in fast, do a huge amount of damage, and then get out before the enemy had time to get organised. Churchill liked this. He called it the butcher and bolt approach. So what kind of men were they? Well, if popular myth is anything to go by, they were lantern-jawed killing machines who could headbutt their way through oak doors. The reality, though, was rather different.
Gerard Brett in my regiment was in my commando, 12 Commando, and he'd written a book on the Byzantine age or Byzantine architecture or something.
One fellow who got a divinity degree from Trinity College, Dublin.
Lance Corporal Potts had been a don at either Oxford or Cambridge.
They included a poacher, a TT, motorcycle rider, so a mixed bag.
What they represented was a complete revolution in the concept of soldiering. Because they were chosen for their individuality, their intelligence, their initiative. And nobody embodied that ethos more than this man, Mickey Byrne.
People were left to make up their own minds. In war, anybody, everybody may be killed, and what decides the action may be the action of a private soldier who's left to command a trench. It wasn't put like that, but the feeling we were given that every single one of us might be as important as a brigadier. We were all individuals, you know. Discipline did matter, of course, but I wouldn't have said it was absolutely first.
The commando forces were made up of volunteers from any of the regular army units, and the philosophy of how they went about their daily business was a million miles from that of the conventional military. For a start, they didn't bother with barracks or regimental headquarters because the commandos didn't want to waste training time on mundane chores such as cleaning or maintenance. Instead, they simply got digs in a nearby town. And there was no sergeant major on hand to tell them what to do every minute of the day.
Instead of saying, parade tomorrow on the main square in Weymouth, it might be parade tomorrow at 10 o'clock on the in the marketplace at Dorchester, and find your own bloody way there, you know.
You weren't shouted at. There wasn't any of this shouting or bullying or anything that you got in the regular army. You led by example, so, you know, the officer had to do everything that you did.
If the officers can do it, I can do it. If the officers can do it.
Unfortunately, though, the British Army top brass were a deeply conservative bunch, and they really didn't like the new commando philosophy.
The regular army were doing their best to get us disbanded. They hated us, some of them. We were a nuisance.
And because our standards were so high, we'd creamed off the best of the people in the regiments. And in fact, a lot of COs refused to allow people to volunteer.
This resistance by the regular army certainly got Churchill's back up. What I have here is a letter he wrote to the Secretary of State for War. And he says, I hear that the whole position of the commandos is being questioned. They've been told no more recruiting and that their future is in the melting pot. Says he feels very strongly about this. Says the defeat of France by Germany was accomplished by an incredibly small number of high, while the dull mass of the German army came on behind. And then here, for every reason, therefore, we must develop the commando idea. Pretty clear cut.
One.
The backbone of their training was speed marching, and each commando unit would compete to see who could go the furthest in the shortest time. One group went 63 miles in 19 hours. Another marched 53 miles from Harlech to the top of Mount Snowdon and then down again in 17.5 hours. And remember, they did this while carrying 60-pound packs on their backs.
Determination is the most important thing, even on speed marches, where our great aim was to get the chaps to do 15 miles in full kit in just under 3 hours, finish up on the assault course and firing, and then leisurely go up to the top of Ben Nevis. It's all part of mentally equipping them to do anything.
Not only was commando training tough, but it was also revolutionary. The regular army would stay fit by doing star jumps in PE kit. The commandos trained in harsh terrain in battle dress. They invented the assault course. In fact, their methods were so advanced, they're still used by elite forces today.
Determination, doing things which you thought you couldn't possibly do, like on the Tarzan course, on a rope bridge or the death line. And don't forget, the chaps and commandos weren't supermen, they were ordinary chaps from all walks of life, but they were trained well, trained to get the edge.
And instead of doing weapons training on rifle ranges, commandos practiced in massive mock battles with live fire.
All the weapon training was geared to offensive action. A little example, the Bren gun was normally fired on the ground, but why not use it, firing it from the hip? And this was an innovation.
And they weren't just revolutionary with guns either, they also learned unarmed combat, stuff no regular soldier had ever even heard of.
How to tackle a bloke with your bare hands. Knock him out, spoil his prospects and pinch his weapon. And his gold watch too if he's got one.
The key element was getting themselves to convince themselves they could do anything. And you can only do that in the military sense if you train people to urge them on and overcome their inner fears and give them supreme confidence.